Welcome to this module of the Budgets and Finance course, part of the State Library of Iowa's Director Endorsement Program. This module is all about budget presentations. My name is Mary Ann Morey, and I'm the Central District Consultant with the State Library of Iowa. At the completion of this module, you should be able to identify who are the stakeholders or funders of your library and demonstrate ways to effectively communicate to those stakeholders, as well as to your entire community, the financial aspects of the public library. If you recall from the previous module about budget practices, sometime in the fall or at the latest by December or January, you will need to have a budget ready to present to your city council and your county supervisors. But you may also realize that it's helpful to make similar appeals to other stakeholders at other times of the year. Knowing your stakeholders is the first step. Think for a moment about all of your funding resources. As we've identified in other modules, these entities noted on the slide, city, county, state, and donors, are probably your primary library funders, but don't think of these as just entities. Rather, think of them as people, various members of your community, city council members, supervisors, legislators, and individuals. Don't think of them as just nameless or faceless individuals, but think of them as people with names and faces who live in your community and who need to hear about what the library is doing to serve the public, and who need to hear what the library may need in the line of continued or increased funding. These are your stakeholders, and you might even have some stakeholders you're not aware of. Studies have shown that in general, residents support having a local public library in their area, even if they don't use it. So realize that everyone in your service area is a potential stakeholder. It's not just the folks coming through your door. Building personal relationships is one of the most important things a library director can do. Any kind of major fundraising requires that you already have good, established relationships with your public. Taking the time to get out and about in your community, to learn individuals' names, to partner with organizations may very well pay off down the road. Other stakeholders in your area might include formal service organizations such as Kiwanis, Rotary, or Lions. Check with them to see if they'd be interested in learning more about the library's activities and ways they can be actively involved with the library as volunteers or funding partners. Your area might also have some informal groups that are looking for good causes to support. I've known of libraries that have developed good partnerships with groups such as quilting clubs, gardening clubs, local women's clubs, or simply informal business groups. A local chamber of commerce can be another good way to meet people and other organizations that may potentially be partners with the library. Since most chambers have a goal of improving their communities, the library is a logical partner for them. Some libraries host chamber meetings, and many times local businesses are happy to contribute towards special needs of the library. There might also be ways for the library's services to be offered through a local business. For instance, providing early childhood literacy information and materials at a local pediatrician's office. You might not realize it yet, but your community may have that special someone who is wondering what to do with assets in the future and looking for a way to make a positive, lasting difference in the community. That person might appreciate hearing the needs and opportunities the library has. Remember that stakeholders aren't only those people or organizations with money. Stakeholders are the people you can turn to for help, as in volunteer power, when you need it. They're the ones who may be persuasive with your city council about fully funding the library. They're your supporters. Once you've identified your stakeholders and determined appropriate times for presenting a budget presentation, it's time to actually develop your presentation. The American Library Association has some good resources on its website about budget presentations. The first item on this list is fundamental. Quote, "The best budgets are always tied to the best spending plans. Instead of just asking for more, Budget presentations must tie performance and justification to requests for increases, end quote. Several years ago, OCLC oversaw a community awareness campaign called Geek the Library that was designed to highlight the role of public libraries and raise awareness about funding issues many libraries face. The campaign was a research project that resulted in a publication titled From Awareness to Funding, a study of library support in America. I mention this campaign for a couple of reasons. First, Iowa was one of only 2 states where the program piloted. And second, the campaign led people to be more willing to fund the library and to take action to advocate for the library. Geek the Library went on to be offered nationally after the pilot program ended. I encourage you to take a look at the resulting work from this campaign as published in the complete report. You can see here the gist of Geek the Library, where geek was defined as a verb. Access the information from the link on the top banner to see more about this initiative. As I said, after the very successful pilot program, Geek the Library was offered nationwide. A library director in New York summarized the success of the Geek initiative by saying this: Geek the Library resonated so well because it is a progressive awareness campaign that leads up to what we all need to do, which is ask for support. At some point, you have to say, look, we really need your support. Remember that this is the ultimate purpose of your budget presentation, to tell your stakeholders that we really need your support. Many people mistakenly think libraries are funded through state or federal dollars. Geek the Library busted those myths. These may be myths that you still need to clarify today. As you have hopefully learned from other modules in this course, state monies don't account for too much of your budget, and federal dollars reach you only through programs and services the state library provides for your library. The majority of library budgets come from local sources. Helping your public understand this fact can go a long way in their understanding the importance of local funding and support. In 2013, PLA published a product of emerging leaders that was all about library campaigns that made a difference. The ideas in this publication can be inspiring, and it's readily available online. One of those successful campaigns was from New York Public Library. You can see a couple of tips on this slide in blue about why this library card sign-up campaign was successful. Because it spoke to the people, it hit an emotional spot. And because the library got creative with what they had that is unique about its community and the people served. Keep those thoughts in mind as you consider developing your own presentations and campaigns for your library. And realize that both those tips apply to all size libraries, from great big ones such as New York Public Library down to our smallest A-size libraries here in Iowa. You have got to speak to the people, and you've got to share what's unique about your library and your community. Here's a successful funding campaign done by a smaller library in New York State. This example proves the need for you to know your community's needs. From the insert, you see that during the initial research about the library's funding, it was found that while the library was important to the community, recreation was on everyone's mind. So the library was rebranded using recreation as integral to its new brand, and then segueing the marketing campaign into its advocacy effort. You can see on this slide a sample of the library's marketing poster that used real local residents and tied the library's offerings with recreational aspects. Passion is an important aspect of leadership. In that Geek the Library information I mentioned a few slides ago, one of the discoveries from the research was this: people's support for libraries is related to the passion they perceive librarians feel for their library. Think for a moment and ask yourself, how passionate am I about the library? What makes you passionate for the library? And how can you express that passion to your stakeholders? That passion that you hopefully have for your library will become the fuel for your budget requests. But even with a sufficient amount of passion, there are still a few best practices that can help you put your passion into a request. The first best practice of a budget request is to communicate. Communicate what you're doing, how you're funding, and what you need. Do this on a regular basis, not just at budget season or when your funding is threatened. And during special times of giving, be specific about what the library needs. People are more likely to contribute toward a specific, tangible item. For instance, a bookmobile, as you see on this library's wish list, rather to a general pot of money without knowing exactly how those funds will actually be used. When it comes time for your annual budget presentations, for instance, to your city council or to your county supervisors, you have some options. You could do like some libraries have done when presenting before the county supervisors. The librarians at the various libraries in the county provide the supervisors with copies of each library's annual survey. Now, even if you only have a couple of libraries in your county, it's highly doubtful that any recipient of these reports will do more than give them a casual glance. And imagine if your library has 6, 7, or more libraries. That's a lot of multi-page reports to have to plod through. While the information contained in the reports is good, it will probably go unread and consequently be lost on your intended recipients. I don't recommend this kind of presentation unless your audience specifically asks for that information. Also, numbers without context are often meaningless. Think about these better ways to share your statistics. You can share a written report that includes a hard fact such as circulation total 95,000. You'll have to hope that someone will read that information and understand what circulation means and be able to contextualize the number 95,000 to know if that's a good figure or a less than stellar figure. You could state the information in a way that's a little more user-friendly by saying, the library checked out 95,000 items to library users. Or you could illustrate and explain what the number means like this. Last year, the library checked out a total of 95,000 items. That's an average of 19 items per person in our town every month. It's a 39% increase from last year in use of our library materials. Now the number 95,000 makes sense as we see how it applies to a personal level among the city's population, as well as the fact that it's a substantial increase. Instead of just providing a black and white multi-page copy of annual survey stats, consider condensing those numbers into something more palatable and readable for your recipients. Consider making an infographic. This slide shows an infographic of an infographic, showing you aspects to consider on your own chart that you might create. There are several readily available and often free software programs available to help you create an infographic. Search online, talk to other librarians, or ask your district consultant for some recommendations about such resources. Here's a 2019 example of an infographic from Warren County Libraries here in Iowa. There are 6 libraries in that county. They prepared this one-page handout for their county supervisors that quickly, easily, and attractively showed what the libraries had collectively accomplished as library services for rural residents. They added photos of a big county-wide event where they all collaborated for a Pete the Cat event. Here are a couple of other examples from Iowa libraries. These were created as half-page or bookmark-style handouts. There's lots of information on each, but it's all presented in a brief and easy on the eyes manner. This kind of budget information presentation is much more likely to be viewed and actually read than a multi-page stack of papers that's nothing but fine print. If given the opportunity, you will want to consider making an in-person presentation, such as you see done by this Iowa library director. Actually showing up at the budget hearing may show to the stakeholders that you're willing to make an effort to provide them with information and answer their questions. I should add that if you're able to make regular visits and reports to your stakeholders, you should do so. Don't just show up when the money is being divvied out if you're welcome to attend at other times of the year. An optimal option for budget presentations is to do a combination of in-person appeals alongside attractive visuals. This is part of a Marion County Librarian's presentation for county supervisors, a set of only 11 slides. Each of the county's 5 libraries had one slide to share information about that particular location, and the remaining slides were collective information. This slide shows what one of the small libraries did with their single slide. Melcher Dallas Library shared a story that illustrates how vital the public library is to rural patrons who can't get high-speed internet at home. The director relayed the story about a rural resident who had to park his car outside the library because he needed to attend a Zoom meeting and didn't have high-speed internet at his home. The man had come to the library and accessed its Wi-Fi even during the time when the library was closed to the public due to the 2020 pandemic. What a wonderful story of providing a much-needed service for a resident, and what a way to stress the importance of continued or increased funding for the library. In all of your budget presentations, you'll want to think about these tips. Know your numbers. Understand how you derived at the numbers you're requesting and why you're requesting those amounts. Be prepared with answers, or at least be prepared to say, I don't have that information right now, but I'll gather it and get back to you. Be sure to show justifiable proof of why you need the increased funding. For example, stress what you'll be able to do with the additional funds, or likewise, stress what you'll have to cut if funds are not granted. Have quotes or stats from the public, in other words, both qualitative and quantitative data. Use actual photographs if you have them. Always be pleasant and try to be creative. You can make your presentation more memorable by being creative. Here are some very creative ways I've heard of libraries making their funding more understandable. With the pie, a group of librarians took tiny slivers of pie and set them before their county supervisors to show that part of the funding pie that the libraries were receiving was very small and that they had to share it among themselves. This was a way to appeal for funding that touched the senses of sound, sight, smell, and taste. Another group of librarians gave each supervisor a loaf of bread and explained that for the cost of a loaf of bread, here's what the library has accomplished with the funds you've given us. This was a way to show the cost effectiveness and positive return on investment of the library. It could also be used as a way to say, now imagine what we could accomplish if you added the cost of some lunch meat and cheese. One library that was advocating for a building project found a way to make a seemingly impossible dollar amount seem more attainable by translating the amount needed to the cost of a Big Mac per capita needed for the library's building campaign. Using a catchy analogy to help make dollar figures more understandable, such as these analogies I'm showing here, can be both creative and memorable. The American Library Association features these additional tips in its article titled Navigating a Challenging Budget Year. Some of the highlights include that your advocacy message should be positive. This is not a time to be whining. Your message should be directly tied with what people value about your library. Make it catchy. That means concise, to the point, and attention-grabbing. Maybe you have a slogan. Be memorable. Have something that will stay with the people. And your presentation should lend itself to a variety of formats: flyers, bookmarks, posters, petitions, postcards, newsletters, websites, media ads, etc. We've talked quite a bit about what to do, but here's a short list of don'ts from the American Library Association. Here's what not to do for a budget presentation or campaign. Don't underprepare. Remember when we said earlier that you've got to have reasons and justifications for your budget requests. Don't avoid answering questions or fake an answer. Be as transparent as possible. And while you want to be transparent, you also don't want to get pinned in a corner or be confrontational. You can find more tips on ALA's website from this article titled Making Budget Presentations. If you want the public to regularly support your library, you'll need to make it as easy as possible for them to do so. If there's any way you can arrange for online giving, that seems to often be more effective than asking people to go to the trouble of writing a check, putting it in an envelope, finding a stamp, and dropping the donation in a mailbox. Those are a lot of steps, and each step is an opportunity for the potential donor to rethink or to procrastinate the giving. Many libraries are now posting information directly on their website about how to support the library through financial means. The example on the slide is from Sioux City Public Library here in Iowa. Other libraries target their friends or foundation groups for online giving, such as this library in Independence, Iowa has done. There are resources available to assist you with your budget questions and concerns. Here are some common contacts which we've shared in previous modules, including the Iowa League of Cities, the State Auditor's Office, and the State Library of Iowa. Remember that it often takes a lot of stakeholders to fund and support your library. Identifying those stakeholders, developing positive relationships with them, and presenting successful budget appeals can all contribute toward the financial success of your library. This concludes our module about budget presentations.